Just your kind of overall impressions of regulation and its appropriate role.
Okay, so I was a financial regulator at a pretty high level. And I think that regulation often is excessive. I certainly got rid of more rules than I created. But I also think that simultaneously, you can have too many rules and too little regulation, effective regulation. And I think that's precisely what we have. And of course, that's arguably the worst of all worlds. So to give the example, Dodd-Frank in the United States mandated enormous number of rules. And then the effective process is that the largest banks demand all kinds of exceptions and clarifications, and they make the process massively complicated. And that is, in fact, hard on small and medium-sized banks. And then, of course, they turn around and lobby saying we need relief from the rules which big banks have actually created in large part. But I think also Dodd-Frank was not coherent. In other words, it didn't look at the real causes of the crisis, which were frauds, often by the largest banks. And as a result, it was a bunch of good ideas, kind of generally, but if you don't have a coherent theory that actually tracks the reality, then you get 1,000 unrelated good ideas, which have 6,000 regulations. I mean, there are only really 2,000, but 2,000, of course, is preposterous. So, yes, we need more effective regulators who are actually willing to enforce what we call bright line rules. Bright line rules are, no, we're not trying to make the perfect rule. Don't let the search for the perfect become the enemy of the good. Make the rules simple, understandable, cut the number down dramatically, but enforce those that you do have.
Okay, and you did mention Dodd-Frank, and there are regulations kind of throughout the world that are becoming into effect now because of the financial crisis in many of the same ways. The small and medium-sized business, maybe the startup, maybe the entrepreneur, they have so much less in terms of the infrastructure to deal with new regulation, and especially on the scale and scope that you had just kind of touched on. What, through more effective regulation, you can help them, or are there any other things that can kind of help the small and medium-sized enterprise effectively and honestly address a regulation paradigm that they now have to deal with, which is going to be much larger, it seems?
Right, so that you want far fewer rules and you want clear-cut rules. Again, what we call bright line rules. That is much easier for small and medium-sized businesses to deal with, whether they're banks or not. This problem goes well beyond banking. But what we also need to worry about is what helped bring the crisis and help explain where it was most severe, which was the regulatory race to the bottom between the City of London and Wall Street. And that race was won, obviously in quotation marks, by the City of London, which is why it is now the financial cesspool of the world. So we also don't want to create that mechanism. We want regulators who actually believe in being the regulatory cops on the beat. We want to get rid of the entities that are so big that they can't be regulated effectively. They can't be shut down. They're too big to fail as well. That would dramatically help smaller and medium-sized banks. And we want to get rid of this idea that it's fine to have any and all merger even though it reduces competition substantially. Antitrust was something that Adam Smith certainly believed in very heavily, saying, yes, we have to protect these smaller businesses from both monopoly and what we also saw in the crisis, cartels. So LIBOR and the foreign exchange cartels are both, compared to anything else in world history, the world's largest cartels by 3 orders of magnitude. And so international enforcement against cartels has been close to non-existent in the financial sphere. You're quite right that it isn't just a case of the United States. The EU in particular has rules. The UK has separate rules, a debate about ring fencing versus activity limitations as well. And that debate is playing out, of course, right now in the Brexit context. So until that vote is done, nobody's going to concentrate on the rules. And then we have both the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Atlantic version, and those are, in my view, masquerading as trade rules, but they're really designed to allow companies to sue governments in front of these kangaroo tribunals where there's no rule of law. There are 2 active lawsuits, for example, against nations under these investor treaties because the nations had the audacity to adopt rules to try to protect their citizens from dying from smoking. So again, it's a more complicated picture as we see it. There are a lack of good rules, and there is an abundance of stupid rules that need to be cleared out. It would be nice if you adopted people who are experienced, who have experience in both the regulation and in the business world, who could work through this. But that's a lot of non-sexy stuff that politicians can't take credit for and things like that. So it's really the technocrats that need to do it. And right now, ideologically, and by the way, there's a ratchet from the OECD that is constantly against effective regulation. So while they're vigorous, relatively speaking, on the tax side, too vigorous for CIFA at times, they're actually the opposite way on most financial regulation. They're not only brakes on regulations that need to occur, they are actually very eager to roll back regulation. As I said, I could agree with them fully on rolling back maybe even up to 80%, but they'd probably do more damage rolling back 100% instead. So I hope for more nuance.